Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. Welcome. Thank you so much to everyone who has supported our project. Every like, every new subscriber motivates us to create more historical videos. If you enjoy history without unnecessary detours, subscribe. New videos are released every day. Tell us in the comments the name of a historical figure you would like to see here. Our story today will take us to ancient China, a land torn apart by war, but also filled with ambition and vision. It is the story of a man who rose from uncertain beginnings to unite a vast territory under one rule. His name was Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. Our story takes place in Handan, capital of the Zhou kingdom, in the year 259 before Christ. At that moment, China was not yet a single country. It was a fractured land, divided into 7 powerful states locked in constant warfare, a time known as the Warring States period. Armies clashed across fertile plains and rugged mountains, while alliances shifted with the winds of politics. In this turbulent setting, a boy was born who would change the destiny of the Chinese world. His name at birth was Zheng. His father was Zhuangxiang, prince of the state of Qin, and his mother was Zhao Ji, a woman from the Zhou kingdom. His arrival was marked by uncertainty. Why? Because his father lived in Handan as a political hostage. The boy's birthplace itself symbolized the tension between 2 rival powers, Qin in the west and Zhao in the north. The young child grew up in an atmosphere where survival depended on cunning. Handan was not a safe haven. Rival courtiers plotted, spies whispered, and even royal hostages lived with the fear of sudden execution if political winds shifted. According to the records of the grand historian by Sima Qian, later historians noted that the child's very existence was controversial. Rumors spread about his mother's closeness to Lu Buwei, a wealthy merchant who rose to political prominence in Qin. Was Lu Buwei the child's true father? Ancient sources debate this question, leaving an air of mystery around Zheng's origins. Imagine the weight of such whispers for a child who would one day rule an empire. Could one truly rise above such suspicions? Or would these doubts forever shadow his reign? Despite uncertainty, Zheng's early years unfolded in the Zhou capital, a city known for its vibrant markets and military traditions. Handan was both a place of opportunity and peril. He witnessed firsthand the atmosphere of suspicion between rival kingdoms. Soldiers marched through the streets. Envoys from distant lands negotiated behind closed doors. And every day, the boy lived under the shadow of possible violence. This early environment shaped him. Unlike children raised in peace, Zheng learned that power meant survival. He observed the cruelty of politics, the fragility of alliances, and the dangers of court intrigue. Every laugh in the palace could hide betrayal. Every banquet might end in blood. By the time he was a teenager, these experiences had planted in him a sense of determination. He would not remain a pawn. He would not live under the control of others. One day, he would rise beyond the fear of being a hostage. He would claim his right to rule. The boy born in Handan had entered a world torn apart by ambition. But who could have predicted that he would not only survive, but also conquer? Would this fragile child of uncertain parentage truly become the ruler of all China? The answer, as we will see, would surprise even his enemies. Childhood and youth in Qin, 259 to 247 BC. After his birth in Handan, fate soon shifted the young Zheng's path. His father Zhuangxiang eventually returned to the Qin kingdom and claimed the throne, taking Zhao Ji and the child with him. For the boy who had lived his earliest years under the shadow of danger, Qin now became both home and training ground. But what did home mean in an age of endless wars? It was not a place of peace. It was a forge where rulers were hardened by ambition. The Qin state itself was very different from the cultured cities of the East. Situated in the rugged lands of the Wei River Valley, Qin had a reputation for harsh discipline, strong armies, and strict legalist policies. Historians such as Mark Edward Lewis, in the early Chinese empires, emphasize how Qin's strength came from its severe laws and relentless military organization. Unlike other states that prized Confucian scholars and poets, Qin rewarded soldiers and administrators who obeyed orders without hesitation. This was the environment that shaped Zheng's youth. As a child in the Qin palace, he was surrounded by tutors, generals, and officials who instructed him not in luxury but in discipline. He learned about the legalist philosophy that dominated Qin politics, a system that placed the state above the individual, demanded total obedience, and used strict punishments to maintain order. What effect would such a philosophy have on a boy destined to rule? Could it explain the stern and sometimes merciless policies he would later impose? Zheng's education was not only intellectual but also physical. He was trained in riding horses, wielding weapons, and enduring hardship. His instructors understood that survival in the Warring States period required more than delicate learning. It demanded resilience and toughness. Every lesson reminded him that a ruler who showed weakness risked losing his throne, his kingdom, and his life. The boy's personality soon became clear to those around him. He displayed a sharp mind and an almost unshakable will. Sima Qian in the records of the Grand Historian portrays him as determined, sometimes severe, even in his youth. He was not known for gentle charm but for a seriousness beyond his years. His gaze, observers noted, carried intensity. He was not the kind of child who played freely. He was one who calculated, observed, and remembered. Meanwhile, the Qin court was far from tranquil. Intrigues swirled around his mother Zhao Ji and her connection to Lu Buwei, the former merchant turned prime minister. Lu Buwei had helped Zhuangxiang seize power, and his influence at court remained immense. Did the young prince sense the whispers about his paternity? Ancient texts suggest the rumors were impossible to ignore. For a boy being trained to rule, these doubts could either weaken his spirit or drive him to prove himself beyond any question. Which path would Zheng choose? The political atmosphere in Qin constantly reminded him that rulers were not safe from betrayal. Enemies surrounded the kingdom on every side. Zhao to the north, Chu to the south, Wei to the east. Inside the court, rival officials competed for power, and every alliance was temporary. For a child, this could have been terrifying. But for Zheng, it was preparation. He learned to distrust, to anticipate, to strike before being struck. In these years, he began to exercise small responsibilities under supervision. Decisions about local administration were presented to him, and his judgment was tested. It was said that he rarely hesitated. Where others might deliberate endlessly, the young prince decided quickly, often with a firmness that startled older ministers. Was this decisiveness the mark of natural leadership, or a defense against a world that gave him no room for uncertainty? As his father's reign continued, Zheng saw firsthand how power was maintained through military campaigns. Qin's armies pushed at the borders of rival states, conquering territories, building fortresses, and expanding their reach. The boy accompanied generals on inspections, listening to their reports, watching soldiers drill with precision. The clash of swords, the tramp of armies, these became familiar sounds in his upbringing. Could a child raised among the sights of war ever imagine a world of peace? Or would conquest become his only vision of stability? By the time he reached adolescence, it was clear that Zheng was not an ordinary royal heir. He carried himself with authority, rarely indulging in pleasures that distracted other princes. His mind seemed fixed on one goal: survival and power. Even at banquets, he was said to watch the faces around him, as if searching for signs of betrayal. The lessons of Handan had not been forgotten. His youth in Qin was also marked by personal distance. While other states celebrated scholarly debate, the Qin court demanded loyalty and obedience. This environment isolated the prince. His companions were not friends in the modern sense but subjects and rivals. Perhaps this explains why later in life he distrusted scholars, poets, and critics. He had not grown up with the warmth of intellectual companionship but with the cold necessity of command. Yet, through all of this, he prepared himself for something greater. His father's reign was fragile. Zhuangxiang had gained power with Lu Buwei's help, but his health was failing. Officials whispered about succession, and eyes turned toward the young Zheng. Would he be ready when the time came? Could a boy hardened by suspicion and discipline rise above the chaos to claim the throne? As the year 247 before Christ approached, the answer would soon be revealed. The sudden death of King Zhuangxiang would place the weight of an entire kingdom on the shoulders of a boy barely 13 years old. How would he face the throne so young, with enemies circling and allies uncertain? And what role would the powerful Lu Buwei play in this transition? Ying Zheng takes the throne, 247 BC. Our story now moves to the year 247 before Christ. In the western state of Qin, tragedy struck. King Zhuangxiang, who had ruled for only a few short years, suddenly died. His reign had been brief and his health fragile, leaving the throne to his 13-year-old son, Ying Zheng. For the first time, the boy who had been born in captivity in Handan and raised under suspicion and discipline now carried the title of King of Qin. But could someone so young truly rule a kingdom locked in constant war? The news of Zhuangxiang's death shook the Qin court. In a society where power often passed quickly through violence and intrigue, the succession of a child king posed real danger. Ministers, generals, and nobles all understood that a throne held by a boy might invite rebellion or manipulation. Who would truly hold power until Ying Zheng came of age? The answer, at least at first, was Lu Buwei. Lu Buwei, once a wealthy merchant, had risen to astonishing heights. He had helped Zhuangxiang secure the throne, and in return, he had been made Chancellor of Qin. His influence was so great that ancient texts describe him as almost a second ruler. Sima Qian, in the records of the Grand Historian, even claimed that Lu Buwei was sometimes called the second father of the young king. But was his loyalty genuine, or was his ambition greater than his devotion? Historians still debate whether Lu Buwei sought to use the boy king as a puppet to secure his own dominance. In those first years, Ying Zheng was formally king, but it was Lu Buwei who steered the ship of state. The chancellor oversaw military campaigns, court decisions, and diplomacy. Qin continued to expand its influence, launching attacks on neighboring territories and pressing its advantage during this volatile era. Yet, in the background, the young king observed carefully. Unlike a child distracted by play, Ying Zheng paid close attention to every detail of governance. He listened to reports, studied maps of battlefields, and watched the maneuvers of officials. What was going through his mind? Did he resent Lu Buwei's control? Or did he quietly prepare to seize power for himself? The palace at Xianyang, the capital of Qin, became the stage for hidden struggles. While Lu Buwei projected authority, the Queen Mother Zhao Ji also played a role. Widowed at a young age, she was thrust into new prominence as the mother of the king. But her behavior soon became the subject of scandal. Ancient chronicles accuse her of indulging in extravagant affairs, particularly with a man named Lao Ai, who allegedly schemed to place his own children on the throne. According to the historian Dirk Bod in China's First Unifier, a study of the Qin dynasty, this scandal nearly destabilized the court. Imagine the shock for a teenage king who discovered that his own mother's relationships threatened his reign. Was Ying Zheng angered, or simply calculating? Ancient records suggest that when the plot of Lao Ai was exposed, the young ruler responded with decisive brutality. Lao Ai was executed, his followers destroyed, and Zhao Ji herself was pushed into political seclusion. For a boy barely past childhood, it was a chilling demonstration of willpower. Could this moment have marked the beginning of Ying Zheng's transformation from dependent youth into independent monarch? Meanwhile, Lu Buwei's position began to weaken. Though still chancellor, he sensed that the king was growing less pliant. Ying Zheng started to assert himself in decision-making. He overruled advisors, inspected armies personally, and demanded obedience from officials who had once bowed only to Lu Buwei. The balance of power was shifting, silently but steadily. The great irony of Lu Buwei's career was that the man who had once shaped the rise of the Qin throne now faced suspicion from the very king he had elevated. Whispered rumors of Lu Buwei's intimacy with Zhao Ji and doubts about Ying Zheng's parentage haunted the court. Could the chancellor remain safe in a world where the king trusted almost no one? Sima Qian records that Lu Buwei eventually fell into disgrace. Stripped of authority and facing possible execution, he drank poison to end his life. His fall was as sudden as his rise. For Ying Zheng, this was a turning point. At last, the throne was his alone. No longer would others rule in his name. He was young, but he had learned from years of careful observation. He understood how ministers schemed, how power slipped from the careless, how betrayal lurked even within families. This knowledge made him both cautious and ruthless. The challenges of governance were immense. Qin's rivals watched closely, eager to exploit any weakness in a boy king. Armies of Chu, Zhao, and Wei still roamed the plains. Internal corruption threatened the stability of the state. But Zheng approached these challenges with relentless focus. Unlike rulers of other states, who often enjoyed poetry, feasts, and music, he remained austere. His passion was not culture but power. He reorganized court routines, strengthened the legalist system, and demanded strict loyalty from his officials. How did those around him view this transformation? Some likely feared him, others admired his resolve. But none could doubt that Qin's young king had become something more than a figurehead. He was determined to wield real authority. This chapter of his life raises haunting questions. Was his harshness the result of betrayal by those closest to him? Did the scandals of his mother and the fall of Lu Buwei convince him that no one could ever truly be trusted? If so, it would explain much of his later reign, the censorship, the harsh punishments, the suspicion of scholars, and the obsession with control. As Zheng matured into his late teens, Qin itself was changing. Its armies grew stronger. Its officials tightened their grip on conquered lands. And in the palace at Xianyang, a king once overshadowed by his regent now commanded absolute obedience. By the time he reached adulthood, Zheng was no longer merely the boy king of Qin. He was a ruler in his own right, ready to launch campaigns not only to defend his kingdom but to conquer all of China. But how could one young man hope to overcome 6 rival states, each with armies, traditions, and ambitions of their own? The next stage of his story would test whether discipline and determination could truly bend history itself. The consolidation of power in Qin, 247 to 230 BC. When Zheng emerged from adolescence into early adulthood, the throne of Qin no longer stood under the shadow of regents or chancellors. The scandals that had rocked the court, the affair of his mother, the fall of Lu Buwei, were now behind him. What remained was a determined king with absolute authority over one of the most disciplined states of the Warring States period. But how would he use that authority? Would he merely defend his kingdom, or would he pursue something far greater? The Qin state had been preparing for dominance long before Zheng's reign. Situated in the rugged west, Qin had cultivated military strength for generations. Its laws were strict, its punishments harsh, its rewards clear. A soldier who obeyed and succeeded could rise in rank regardless of birth. This system created loyalty not to noble families but to the state itself. Historians such as Li Feng in early China, a social and cultural history emphasized that Qin's power rested not only on soldiers, but also on administrators who enforced uniform standards across conquered territories. Zheng inherited this machinery of power, and he intended to expand it. The years after he assumed full control were marked by both internal reform and external aggression. Within Qin, he focused on consolidating his authority. He appointed trusted officials, often men of humble origin, to key positions. These appointments broke the traditional power of aristocratic families, who had long held influence in other states. By elevating commoners who owed their position entirely to him, Zheng ensured loyalty. Did this strategy create stability, or did it sow resentment among those who felt displaced? One of his central goals was to strengthen the economy that fueled Qin's wars. He invested in agriculture, ordering the expansion of irrigation systems and canals. The famous Zhanggua Canal, begun during his reign, transformed farmland in the Guangdong region, greatly increasing crop yields. Grain fed soldiers, and soldiers extended Qin's reach. Every new harvest meant more troops and longer campaigns. In this way, infrastructure became as vital to conquest as swords and spears. Externally, Zheng pushed his generals to secure Qin's borders. Rival states knew his ambitions. The kingdom of Zhao to the north, once the land of his birth, remained a dangerous enemy. Chu in the south wielded vast armies. Wei, Yan, and Qi each hoped to check Qin's expansion. But one by one, Qin's armies tested their defenses. Campaigns were launched not always for full conquest but to probe weaknesses, seize strategic fortresses, and intimidate neighbors. The great general Wang Jian, one of Zheng's most trusted commanders, began to rise during this period. Diplomacy also played its part. Zheng used spies and envoys to create divisions among rival states. He encouraged mistrust between them, ensuring that they could not easily unite against Qin. Letters forged by agents, bribes offered to wavering ministers, promises made only to be broken. These tools of political warfare were as sharp as any blade. In a world where alliances were fragile, Qin's ability to manipulate rivals often proved decisive. Yet consolidation was not without risk. Within Qin itself, revolts and conspiracies threatened stability. Some nobles who resented the king's centralization plotted to restore their influence. Local uprisings flared in territories recently absorbed, but Zheng responded with speed and severity. Punishments were harsh, rebels executed, families destroyed, dissent crushed. Sima Qian describes his methods as unforgiving, but effective. The message was clear. Opposition to the king of Qin would not be tolerated. Court, Zheng demanded order. He reorganized bureaucratic offices, set strict reporting systems, and expected detailed records of taxes, labor, and military supplies. Officials who failed in their duties were punished, sometimes executed. This climate of fear ensured efficiency but also stifled dissent. Was such rigidity necessary for unity, or did it foreshadow the authoritarianism that would later define his empire? The people of Qin felt both the weight and the benefits of this consolidation. Farmers were taxed heavily and conscripted into labor projects or the army. Yet the irrigation systems improved their harvests, and the security of Qin's borders allowed markets to thrive. Roads were expanded, allowing merchants to carry goods across the growing territory. Ordinary lives were difficult, but they were also shaped by the growing power of the state. During this period, Zheng's personal character also became clearer. Unlike rulers who sought comfort in luxury, he displayed little interest in art or pleasure. Accounts suggest that he rarely drank wine and distrusted indulgence. His focus remained on governance and conquest. Ministers who attempted to soften him with flattery often failed. He wanted results, not empty words. But did this relentless focus also isolate him, making it difficult to see beyond the needs of power? His interactions with scholars were cautious. Legalist advisors like Li Si, who promoted strict laws and centralized control, gained favor. Confucian thinkers, who valued moral virtue and traditional rituals, often found themselves silenced or ignored. For Zheng, philosophy was not a pursuit of truth but a tool for control. The state needed uniformity, not debate. As the decade advanced, Qin's strength became undeniable. Victories on the battlefield, wealth from agriculture, and efficiency in administration combined to giving Zheng a platform unlike any ruler before him. He was no longer merely defending Qin's position among the warring states. He was preparing for something unprecedented, the unification of all China under one throne. But could such a dream succeed? For centuries, states had fought without end. Alliances rose and fell, dynasties crumbled, and no single kingdom had ever conquered them all. To imagine such unity was bold, perhaps even unrealistic. Yet Zheng was not a man limited by tradition. His ambition was larger than the borders of Qin. He believed not just in survival but in destiny. The consolidation of power from 247 to 230 BC was not only a time of reform and expansion, it was the prelude to a storm. Rival kings began to fear him, whispering about alliances to stop Qin. But their mistrust of one another often prevented true cooperation. Meanwhile, Qin's armies grew stronger with each campaign. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic series of conquests in world history. The question now loomed: how would Zheng, once the boy king of Handan, now the hardened monarch of Qin, launch his campaign to conquer 6 powerful states? Would his armies overwhelm them through sheer strength, or would cunning strategies and ruthless decisions break the balance of power? The answer would reshape the map of China forever. The Great Conquests, the unification of China, 230 to 221 BC. The year was 230 before Christ. The king of Qin, Ying, had now spent years strengthening his state, reforming its administration, and building an army unlike any other in the warring states. The moment had arrived to turn preparation into conquest. For centuries, the land of China had been divided among rival kingdoms. Could one man truly bring them all under a single rule? The task seemed impossible. 6 powerful states remained: Han, Zhao, Yan, Wei, Chu, and Qi. Each possessed large armies, fortified cities, and proud traditions. Their rulers believed they could resist Qin's ambitions. Yet Ying was determined to dismantle them one by one. He did not seek balance or negotiation. He sought absolute victory. The first to fall was Han, the weakest of the 6. Surrounded by stronger neighbors and exhausted from years of conflict, Han lacked the strength to resist Qin's armies. In 230 before Christ, Qin's general Zheng led a swift campaign. Han surrendered quickly, its lands absorbed into the growing Qin domain. The conquest was not only a military victory, it was a signal to the other states. Qin would no longer be content with border skirmishes. It aimed to eliminate its rivals. Next came Zhao, the kingdom where Ying himself had been born as a hostage decades earlier. The irony was striking. He returned not as a captive but as a conqueror. Zhao was stronger than Han and had resisted Qin before. Its armies were fierce, its cavalry renowned. But Qin's generals, Wang Jian and Wang Ben, applied relentless pressure. In 228 before Christ, Qin forces captured the Zhao capital of Handan, the very city where Ying had first opened his eyes to the world. Imagine the scene. The boy once whispered about as a vulnerable hostage, now triumphant over the land of his birth. Could any symbol of destiny have been more powerful? With Zhao defeated, Qin turned its gaze to Yan. The kingdom of Yan, located in the northeast near the lands of modern Beijing, knew the danger. In desperation, the crown prince of Yan attempted a bold strike. He sent an assassin named Jing to kill Ying. The story, preserved in the records of the grand historian and later retold in countless plays and films, describes how Jing presented himself at court under the guise of offering tribute. Concealed within a map was a dagger aimed for the king's heart. At the critical moment, the plot failed. The king, though wounded, fought back and survived. What must have raced through his mind as he wrestled with his attacker? Did he see in that instant the fragility of even the most powerful throne? The assassination attempt sealed Yan's fate. Ying ordered a devastating campaign. Qin's armies swept through Yan, crushing resistance and taking territory. By 222 before Christ, Yan was effectively destroyed as an independent power. Meanwhile, Qin struck at Wei. This small kingdom, caught between stronger states, had long been vulnerable. Qin generals advanced methodically, capturing key cities and fortresses. Wei fell swiftly, its lands folded into Qin's growing empire. The greatest challenge came from Chu, the vast southern kingdom. Chu's lands were fertile, its armies immense, and its traditions ancient. For many in China, Chu was seen as the rival that could match Qin in strength. Ying knew that conquering Chu would not be easy. At first, Qin underestimated the task. In 224 before Christ, Qin's initial invasion faltered. The Chu armies resisted fiercely, and Qin suffered heavy losses. Some might have seen this as proof that unification was impossible. But Ying refused to abandon his goal. He turned to his most trusted commander, the veteran general Wang Jian. Known for his caution and discipline, Wang Jian demanded an enormous army. Historians suggest up to 600,000 men. Though the number may be exaggerated, it reflects the scale of the campaign. With overwhelming force, Wang Jian launched a second invasion. This time, Qin crushed Chu's resistance. By 223 before Christ, Chu was subdued, its king captured, its lands annexed. The greatest rival had fallen. Now only Qi remained. Located in the far east along the coast, Qi had watched the destruction of its neighbors with growing dread. Its rulers attempted a strategy of inaction, hoping that Qin might be satisfied after conquering so many others. But Zheng was not a man to leave enemies behind. In 221 before Christ, Qin's armies marched east. Facing little resistance, they occupied Qi's capital Linzi. The kingdom surrendered without a fight. The final piece of the puzzle was complete. For the first time in recorded history, the land of China was unified under one ruler. Zheng, king of Qin, now ruled all the former states of Han, Zhao, Yan, Wei, Chu, and Qi. The warring states period, which had lasted for centuries, was over. The age of division had given way to the age of empire. How did people across these lands react? For some, the conquest meant devastation. Armies marching, cities burning, families displaced. For others, it brought an end to endless war. Farmers who had seen their crops trampled year after year could now hope for stability. Traders who once faced dangerous borders could now move more freely. Was Zheng a liberator who ended chaos, or a conqueror who imposed his will by force? The answer may depend on which side of his armies one stood. Historians such as Yuri Pines, in envisioning eternal empire, argue that Zheng's success came not only from military strength but also from the political weakness of his enemies. Rival states failed to unite against Qin. Distrust and rivalry kept them divided, even as Qin's armies destroyed them one by one. In this sense, Zheng's conquest was both a triumph of his leadership and a failure of his opponent's cooperation. When the conquest was complete, Zheng faced a profound question. What title should he claim? To call himself king seemed insufficient for a man who now ruled all under heaven. He chose a new title, Huangdi, or emperor. In doing so, he declared not just the birth of an empire but the birth of a new identity for China itself. From this moment, he would be known as Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin. The decade of conquest had changed everything. A boy once doubted for his parentage now commanded an empire stretching from the Yellow River in the north to the southern lands of Chu, from the coast of Qi to the mountains of Qin. The dream of unity, once thought impossible, was now reality. But victory was not the end of his story, it was only the beginning. For how could one man hold together such vast territories, filled with diverse peoples, languages, and traditions? Could laws and armies alone create unity, or would something greater be required? Qin Shi Huang now stood at the height of power, yet the greatest challenge still lay ahead. Not just to conquer China, but to rule it. The first emperor, 221 to 214 BC. The year was 221 before Christ. The warring states period was over. For the first time in history, China was united under one man, Zheng, who now adopted a new and unprecedented title, Huangdi, the August Emperor. He declared himself Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of Qin. Why such a title? Because no king before him had ever ruled such vast lands. The age of kings was past. The age of emperors had begun. What did this new empire look like? It stretched from the Yellow River Valley to the fertile lands of Chu in the south, from the eastern coast near Qi to the western mountains of Qin. Millions of people now lived under one ruler. Different dialects, currencies, and customs had to be brought into harmony. How could one man impose order on such diversity? The answer lay in centralization. Qin Shi Huang believed that unity could not survive without uniformity. Guided by his chancellor Li Si, a devoted legalist, he launched sweeping reforms. The written script was standardized. Until then, each state had used variations of Chinese characters, which complicated administration and communication. Now, clerks and scholars across the empire had to adopt a single style, known as the small seal script. This allowed orders from the capital of Xianyang to be read and understood everywhere. Weights and measures were also standardized. Imagine trying to trade grain or silk when each region used different systems. Qin Shi Huang decreed that all merchants must use the same units. Coins were unified too. The round coin with a square hole at its center became the common currency. With these changes, trade could flow across the empire without confusion. Farmers, soldiers, and officials alike now lived under one system. But the emperor's reforms went beyond economics. He reorganized the entire political structure. Instead of leaving conquered lands in the hands of local nobles, He divided the empire into commanderies and counties, governed by officials directly appointed by the central court. This broke the power of hereditary aristocracy. No longer would local lords hold sway. Authority flowed only from the emperor. Historians such as Patricia Ebry in the Cambridge Illustrated History of China emphasize that this system created a model for Chinese government that endured for centuries. Infrastructure projects reinforced this control. Roads were built and expanded, radiating out from the capital like spokes from a wheel. These highways allowed troops to march quickly and officials to travel efficiently. Canals linked rivers, improving transport of grain and supplies. Every stone laid and every road paved tightened the emperor's grip on his vast realm. The military remained central to his rule. Though the empire was unified, Qin Shi Huang new threats lingered. To the north, nomadic tribes of the Xiongnu raided across borders. In response, he ordered the linking of regional walls built by former states into what would later become known as the Great Wall. Though not the massive stone structure seen today, it was a formidable earth and wood barrier stretching thousands of miles. Was this wall merely defense, or a symbol that Qin Shi Huang intended his empire to endure against all enemies? Within the empire, order was maintained through legalist laws. Punishments were severe. Thieves could lose their hands. Families of rebels could be executed. Such harshness instilled fear, but also obedience. Critics might see cruelty. Defenders argued that without strict law, chaos would return. Which was true? Perhaps both. Life for ordinary people was shaped by these reforms. Farmers worked fields that fed soldiers and laborers. Many were conscripted into massive building projects. Roads, canals, and walls. These tasks were grueling, and many died under the weight of forced labor. Yet others benefited from stability. Markets flourished under a single currency. Travelers moved along safe roads. The end of constant warfare meant villages no longer faced annual destruction by invading armies. For peasants who had lived through centuries of conflict, even harsh order could feel like relief. How did Qin Shi Huang view himself? In inscriptions carved on mountains and monuments, he proclaimed his achievements with grandeur. He presented himself not only as ruler of men, but as chosen by heaven to bring order to the world. This belief in destiny drove him further. He was no longer satisfied with being a king of Qin. He was emperor of all under heaven. At court, Li Si and other legalist officials supported these ambitions. They argued that unity required suppression of dissent. Confucian scholars, who promoted ancient traditions and moral authority, were seen as dangerous obstacles. In one infamous episode, the emperor ordered the burning of books not aligned with his policies. Works of philosophy, history, and poetry were destroyed, leaving only practical texts on agriculture, medicine, and statecraft. According to Sima Qian, some scholars who resisted were executed, buried alive to silence opposition. Was this act an attempt to erase the past, or to ensure no rival vision could challenge his empire? The debate continues. Despite such measures, Qin Shi Huang inspired awe. Foreign envoys came to Ying, marveling at the scale of his palace and the efficiency of his court. His officials carried out his decrees with unmatched speed. His generals stood ready to strike at any rebellion. The empire, though young, projected immense power. Yet unity was fragile. Beneath the surface, resentment simmered. Nobles stripped of their lands whispered of revenge. Peasants groaned under the burden of labor. Scholars mourned lost traditions. Was this empire built on solid foundations, or on fear that could one day collapse? Still, during these years from 221 to 214 before Christ, Qin Shi Huang appeared invincible. He had conquered rivals, built walls, standardized systems, and declared himself first emperor. Few in history had risen so high so quickly, but ambition has no end. The emperor was not content with uniting the living. He dreamed of conquering time itself. Stories began to spread of his obsession with immortality, of envoys sent across seas in search of magical elixirs, of alchemists promising eternal life. Could even death itself be defeated by the first emperor? That question would dominate the final years of his reign. The dream of eternity and authoritarian rule, 214 to 210 BC. By the year 214 before Christ, Qin Shi Huang stood at the height of power. He had conquered rival kingdoms, standardized laws and currencies, and declared himself first emperor. Yet even as he surveyed an empire united for the first time in history, a silent enemy shadowed his triumph: mortality. What use was conquest if death would one day take everything away? The emperor's obsession with immortality soon became notorious. He summoned alchemists and magicians to his court, demanding elixirs that could extend his life forever. Ancient texts describe expeditions sent across seas, searching for mythical islands where herbs of immortality supposedly grew. Envoys sailed eastward toward what is now Japan, hoping to return with substances that could defy nature itself. But no matter how many journeys were launched, the emperor remained mortal. Why did he pursue eternal life so desperately? Some historians suggest it was fear. Having built an empire through ruthless conquest, he may have dreaded losing it. Others argue it was ambition. Just as he had united the world of men, he wished to defeat the laws of heaven. Could such an ambition ever be satisfied? While chasing immortality, Qin Shi Huang also sought to secure his legacy in stone and earth. Near the capital of Zheng, he ordered the construction of an immense mausoleum. Thousands of workers labored for decades to create a tomb unlike any other. The site was guarded by an army of life-size terracotta warriors, each with unique features, as if modeled on real soldiers. Horses, chariots, and weapons were crafted to stand beside them. Why such extravagance? Perhaps the emperor believed that, in the afterlife, he would still need an army to defend his rule. The Terracotta Army, uncovered in modern times, remains one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries in history. It reveals not only the emperor's desire for protection beyond death, but also the immense resources he could command. The mausoleum itself, according to Sima Qian, contained rivers of mercury to represent flowing water, ceilings painted with stars, and treasures beyond measure. Was it a monument to human achievement, or a symbol of one man's consuming fear? Yet Qin Shi Huang's rule was not only about tombs and dreams of eternity. Within the empire, his policies grew increasingly authoritarian. Convinced that unity required absolute control, he intensified censorship. The infamous book burnings targeted works that challenged his vision. Confucian texts, records of ancient dynasties, and writings that encouraged criticism were destroyed. Only practical knowledge, medicine, agriculture, and divination was permitted. Scholars who resisted faced execution. This suppression created a chilling atmosphere. Imagine living in a world where history itself was erased, where the past could no longer guide the present. Did the emperor fear that stories of older rulers might inspire rebellion? Or did he believe that forgetting the past was necessary to create a new beginning? Meanwhile, massive construction projects strained the population. The Great Wall, expanded under his orders, required endless labor. Built by linking older regional fortifications, it stretched across mountains and deserts. Workers hauled earth, wood, and stone under harsh conditions. Many died in the process, their bodies said to be buried within the wall itself. For the emperor, this was a shield against northern nomads. For the people, it was a symbol of suffering. Road networks also continued to expand, radiating from the capital. These roads allowed armies to march swiftly and officials to enforce laws across distant provinces. But they were built at immense human cost. Farmers conscripted into labor left their fields, sometimes starving their families. Was the empire stronger for these projects, or weaker because of the resentment they created? The emperor's paranoia deepened. Having survived an assassination attempt by Zheng years earlier, he never forgot the danger of conspiracies. He increased the use of secret police and informants. Officials suspected of disloyalty were executed. Even his own family was not safe from suspicion. Some chronicles suggest that his sons lived under constant fear of their father's wrath. Could a ruler who trusted no one truly secure the loyalty of all? Still, Qin Shi Huang projected strength. He toured his empire in grand processions, inspecting fortresses, visiting sacred mountains, and leaving inscriptions that praised his rule. On Mount Tai, he performed rituals to heaven, proclaiming that his dynasty would last 10,000 generations. Yet behind these proclamations lay unease. His health began to decline. The potions offered by alchemists, many containing mercury and toxic minerals, may have worsened his condition. Ironically, the very elixirs meant to grant immortality may have hastened his death. Accounts from the records of the Grand Historian describe the emperor growing increasingly restless. He feared omens, consulted astrologers, and ordered harsh punishments for anyone who predicted his end. He demanded silence about mortality. But could silence erase the truth? As the final years of his reign unfolded, contradictions defined his rule. He built monuments of unity but spread fear among his people. He sought eternal life but poisoned himself with false cures. He dreamed of lasting peace but imposed relentless labor. Was Qin Shi Huang a visionary who created the foundation of China, or a tyrant who crushed his subjects for personal glory? The line between genius and cruelty blurred with every decision. By 210 before Christ, the emperor's journeys in search of immortality grew longer and more desperate. He traveled east, inspecting coastal regions, still chasing rumors of magical islands. His entourage carried secret instructions, and his ministers struggled to conceal his failing health. The empire, though united, trembled beneath the weight of his obsessions. The dream of eternity was slipping away. But how would the first emperor face his final journey? Would his empire endure beyond him, or collapse under the weight of fear and ambition? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected, on the road through the eastern provinces, where death finally overtook the man who sought to conquer time itself. The last journey, 210 BC. By the year 210 before Christ, the first emperor of Qin was no longer the vigorous conqueror who had ridden at the head of armies. Age, exhaustion, and the toxic elixirs he consumed in search of immortality weighed heavily on his body. Yet he did not slow down. He refused to remain in the palace at Zheng. Instead, he embarked on a grand eastern tour, traveling through the lands he had unified, determined to inspect fortresses, perform rituals, and continue his quest for eternal life. The emperor's entourage was immense. Ministers, generals, astrologers, and alchemists accompanied him. Caravans carried supplies, chariots rolled across newly built roads, and soldiers guarded every path. To the people, his arrival in a city was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. He represented absolute authority. Inscriptions were carved on mountains, praising his achievements and proclaiming his destiny to rule for 10,000 generations. But behind the pomp, a shadow lingered. Qin Shi Huang was unwell. The toxic potions he consumed daily took their toll. Many contained mercury and minerals that slowly poisoned the body. His skin showed signs of decay, and fatigue overtook him more often. Still, he pressed on. He could not accept weakness. Was this determination a sign of strength or denial? During this final tour, he traveled eastward into the coastal regions, hoping again to find traces of the mythical islands where immortals supposedly lived. Envoys were dispatched across the sea, but none returned with proof of success. Frustration deepened his paranoia. He punished those who failed him, as if human error could be blamed for the stubborn truth of mortality. His ministers, especially Li Si, faced a dilemma. They saw the emperor's condition worsening. But who could dare to suggest rest? Who could tell the man who had conquered all under heaven that his strength was failing? Silence was safer than honesty. And so, the emperor continued his journey, even as death crept closer. It was during this tour near the region of modern Shandong that his health collapsed. Accounts differ, but most agree that he fell gravely ill while traveling through the countryside. He could no longer lead processions, no longer inspect fortresses. His attendants panicked. If news of his death spread too soon, chaos could erupt. The empire he had built was vast but fragile. Rivalries simmered within the court. Succession was uncertain. What would happen if officials or generals learned that the emperor was gone before plans were in place? Li Si, along with Zhao Gao, a powerful eunuch and close aide, decided to conceal the truth. When Qin Shi Huang died on the road, his body was hidden. The convoy continued to move, as if the emperor were still alive inside his carriage. To mask the smell of decay in the summer heat, carts of salted fish were placed nearby. The procession returned toward the capital, maintaining the illusion of life. This secrecy was not only about respect, it was about power. Which son would inherit the throne? The emperor had several, but Zhao Gao favored Hu Hai, a younger son more easily manipulated. Li Si agreed, fearing instability if another heir took power. Together, they forged edicts in the emperor's name, instructing the crown prince Fusu, who was stationed at the frontier, to commit suicide. The plot succeeded. By the time the convoy reached the capital, the chosen successor Hu Hai, later known as Qin Shi, was installed as emperor. But in that moment, on the lonely road where Qin Shi Huang breathed his last, the dream of eternity ended. He had sought to outlive all rivals, to command an empire forever, to carve his name into mountains as proof of destiny. Yet like all men, he could not escape death. His body was carried to the vast mausoleum at Lishan, where rivers of mercury and the silent Terracotta Army awaited. What did his final thoughts hold? Did he still believe in immortality, even as life slipped away? Did he regret the harsh punishments, the forced labor, the censorship that defined his rule? Or did he die convinced that his achievements had secured his place in history? We cannot know. What we do know is that his death left an empire both immense and unstable. The first emperor's dream of 10,000 generations would collapse within only a few years, as rebellion spread and the Qin dynasty fell. But in 210 before Christ, on that last journey, such collapse was still hidden in the future. The image is unforgettable. A procession of carriages rolling down dusty roads, ministers concealing the death of the greatest conqueror of their age, salted fish masking the scent of decay, and inside, the body of a man who had sought to conquer time itself. Could any story capture more vividly the fragile boundary between power and mortality? So, who was Qin Shi Huang? A visionary who brought unity to a land torn apart by centuries of war? Or a tyrant who sacrificed thousands in the pursuit of absolute power? The truth may lie somewhere in between, but his story remains one of the most extraordinary in human history. If you are not yet subscribed, join us and support this project. Thank you for watching. Our next video will explore the life of Han Gaozu, the founder of the Han Dynasty, a man of humble origins who defied empires and forever changed the destiny of China. You will enjoy this episode filled with unexpected battles, unlikely alliances, and lasting achievements. Subscribe so you don't miss it when it becomes available. And here are 2 more videos we think you will enjoy. I'll see you there.